Don't look away from me. I asked you a question. You're going to answer it right now.
Sir, we didn't do anything. We're just
Don't talk back. I know how this goes. You kids think rules don't apply to you.
This is my iPad. It's ours.
Funny how you all say the same thing. Hand it over before I make this real ugly.
Please.
At 12:47 p.m., inside a McDonald's on Broad Street in suburban Richmond, Virginia, 3 black children sat in a corner booth sharing a 20-piece nugget box and laughing over their iPads. Elijah was 12, Naomi was 10, and Isaiah had just turned 7. They were well-dressed, well-mannered, and completely absorbed in their screens. The kind of quiet Saturday scene that wouldn't draw a second glance. Their iPads were brand new, still in bright cases, gifts from their grandmother for straight-A report cards. Their grandmother was Judge Vivian Hartwell, 67, a sitting federal judge on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals with 31 years on the bench. She stepped away briefly to use the restroom, leaving the kids with their food and one simple instruction: stay in the booth. The restaurant was busy with a typical weekend crowd. Families with strollers, teenagers at the drink station, and a few solo diners scrolling through phones. No one was bothering anyone, and nothing seemed out of place, except to a white woman near the front counter. Her name was Karen Lipcomb, 54, and something about those children and their iPads made her decide the scene didn't add up. Lipcomb stood, walked the counter, and approached the shift manager, Devin Oae, 23, who was restocking napkin dispensers. Leaning in, she claimed the kids had stolen the iPads from someone's bag. Devin glanced toward the booth, 3 children eating nuggets and watching cartoons. He asked which customer was missing property, but Lipcomb didn't answer. Instead, she repeated the accusation more loudly and warned that if the restaurant didn't act, she would call corporate and report the staff for allowing theft. Devin hesitated. He had seen the children coming with their grandmother and had taken their order himself. The iPads had been in their hands the entire time, and no customer had reported anything stolen. Still, Lipcomb's voice was rising, and Devin was only 6 months into a job he couldn't afford to lose. After asking one more time if she was sure, and being told to stop questioning and call police, Devin picked up the store phone and dialed 911. The call was recorded, and every word would later be played in federal court. Officer Russell Brandt arrived 6 minutes later. He was 42, with 18 years on the Richmond Metro Police Department, and his record looked very different depending on who was reading it. Over the past 14 years, 31 formal complaints have been filed against him, disproportionately from Black and Latino residents. The accusations followed a familiar pattern: excessive force during routine stops, aggressive language during low-risk encounters, and even racial slurs allegedly captured on a dash cam in a prior traffic stop. Footage that was later reported lost during internal review. He had been suspended twice, but both suspensions were reduced to written reprimands after union intervention, and each time supervisors signed off on dismissals or lowered penalties. Brandt learned that complaints rarely stuck and consequences rarely came. His body camera activated as he entered the restaurant. The video would later show him walking past multiple white customers and tables without stopping to gather details. He didn't speak to Devin first, and he didn't look for Lipcomb. Instead, he crossed the dining room and went straight to the only black children in the building. Brandt stopped at the booth at full height, looking down at the kids with his hand resting on his duty belt. Elijah looked up first. Brandt demanded to know where they got the iPads, and Elijah answered politely that the devices belonged to him and his siblings and were gifts from their grandmother for their report cards. Brandt didn't accept the explanation. He stared at the devices and pressed Elijah with questions, including how much the iPads cost and whether anyone in the family even had jobs. Naomi began to cry. Elijah's expression went still, the kind of stillness a child learns when he realizes the adult in front of him isn't interested in the truth. Isaiah pulled his iPad tight against his chest. Brandt ordered all 3 children hand the devices over immediately as suspected stolen property. Elijah asked if they could wait for their grandmother, explaining she was only in the restroom, but Brandt refused and warned that things would get a lot worse if they didn't cooperate. Around them, the restaurant fell quiet. Conversations dropped, people stared, and several customers lifted phones to record. The children didn't run or cause a scene. They hesitated, confused and scared, waiting for an adult who would listen. Elijah's hesitation lasted only a moment, but Brandt reacted physically, grabbing him and taking the iPad by force. The sudden movement knocked over a drink, spilling soda across the tray. Isaiah screamed, not in defiance, but in fear at seeing a uniformed adult grab his brother. Brant snapped at Isaiah, telling him to be quiet in a threatening way. Naomi froze, tears running down her cheeks, as Brant took her iPad from her shaking hands. Isaiah clung to his device, and Brant pried his fingers away one by one, pulling it free and shoving him back into the booth seat. His head struck the wall behind the booth, hard enough to make a nearby customer gasp. A man near the counter stood and shouted that they were children, but Brant turned to the crowd and warned anyone who interfered would be arrested for obstruction. He radioed for backup, describing the children as juvenile suspects, uncooperative, and possible thieves. The kids sobbed as their meals sat untouched, while the iPads were lined up behind Brant like evidence of a crime that hadn't been shown to exist. Officer Nina Solano, 29, arrived 4 minutes later. With under 3 years on the force, she walked into a scene that didn't match dispatch's description. No theft in progress, no clear victim, and 3 crying children surrounded by a visibly upset crowd recording from multiple angles. Solano approached Brant and spoke quietly, suggesting it looked like a misunderstanding and that they should speak to the manager and confirm what actually happened before going further. Brant dismissed her in front of everyone, reminding her he'd been policing longer than she'd been alive and insisting the kids were lying. Solano looked at the children, looked at the crowd, looked at the phones pointed toward them, and then stepped back, choosing not to intervene. Brant ordered Elijah to stand, then conducted a public pat-down in the middle of the restaurant as if he were searching a suspect on a street corner. Afterward, he demanded identification from all 3 children. They stared at him. They had none. They were kids. Brant then radioed dispatch again, requesting juvenile transport and stating his intention to take all 3 minors into custody for theft and uncooperative behavior. That was the moment Judge Vivian Hartwell returned from the restroom, gone less than 5 minutes, and walked into something unrecognizable. Her grandchildren were crying. Elijah stood near the booth with his arms at his sides, face blank. Naomi and Isaiah sat pressed together, holding hands. Brant stood over them with the iPad stacked behind him, while Solano remained off to the side. The restaurant was silent, except for the sound of children sobbing. Vivian crossed the dining room without hesitation and demanded to know what was happening. Brant ordered her to step back, saying the children were being detained. She didn't move. Calmly, she gave her full name, identified herself as her grandmother, explained the iPads were purchased by her 2 weeks earlier as gifts for report cards, and offered to show receipts on her phone. Brant cut her off, saying he didn't care who she claimed to be and implying, "You people always had excuses." He threatened to arrest her for interfering if she didn't step back. Vivian held her ground with the controlled stillness of someone who had spent decades on a federal bench. She stated clearly that she was a federal judge on the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals, that Brant was unlawfully detaining 3 minors without probable cause, and that everything was being recorded, including by his own body camera. Brant responded with a dismissive laugh and mocked her claim, then refused to give his badge number, name, or supervisor information. Vivian pulled out her phone and dialed 911 herself, identify her name and title, and requesting a patrol supervisor at the McDonald's immediately. She stated that an officer was unlawfully detaining her grandchildren and had used physical force against them. Then she called her son, Colonel Terrence Hartwell, the children's father and a judge advocate general officer stationed at Fort Lee, and told him what was happening. Outside, Solano radioed dispatch to run Vivian Hartwell's name, and within 2 minutes dispatch confirmed the judge's identity, court, and active appointment. Solano's face reportedly drained of color as she realized the seriousness of what was unfolding. 14 minutes after the first call, Sergeant Dale Compton, 48, arrived. Before he entered, Solano quickly told him dispatch had verified the grandmother was Judge Vivian Hartwell. Compton paused, then went inside. Brant's body camera would later show Compton crossing the dining room in seconds and ordering Brant to step away from the family immediately. Brant tried to justify his actions, but Compton repeated the order. Brant stepped back, muttering that it didn't matter who she was and that the kids had no business with that kind of device. Words picked up clearly by the body cam microphone. Compton returned the iPads to the children and attempted to de-escalate, offering an apology and promising the department would review what happened. Vivian refused the apology. She stated plainly that this was not a misunderstanding. It was racial profiling of children and aggression toward minors, and would be addressed formally, thoroughly, and publicly before the Hartwell family even left the parking lot. A cell phone video was posted to social media by a college student named Aisha Khan, 20, who had been recording from nearby. The video captured the moment Brandt took the iPad from Elijah, Isaiah's scream, the threats, the shove into booth, the public pat-down, Vivian's calm identification as a federal judge, and Brandt's mocking laugh. Within 48 hours, it reached millions of views, spread across major platforms, and was picked up by local and national news. McDonald security cameras covering the dining room were subpoenaed, and their angles aligned with what the phone videos showed. Brandt's Bodycam footage was requested, but the police department initially refused to release it, citing an internal investigation. Civil rights groups called the delay a cover-up, and petitions demanding release gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures within days. Under mounting pressure, the department issued a familiar statement about taking allegations seriously and conducting a thorough review without naming anyone or admitting wrongdoing. While the police union defended Brandt as a veteran responding to a 911 call and exercising his right to investigate a reported crime without addressing how he handled the situation once he arrived. Meanwhile, the 911 call itself was obtained through a public records request. In the recording, Devin Oae sounded hesitant and uncertain, describing only that a customer had insisted children might be involved in a possible theft. When asked what evidence existed, Devin admitted he wasn't sure. No victim was identified, no missing property was confirmed, and no crime was observed by staff. Devin later told the press he never believed the children had stolen anything. He had watched them enter with their grandmother and had seen the iPads in their hands the entire time. He said he called police only after Lipcom threatened to report him to corporate, and he feared losing his job. Lipcom was identified online. Her role in the call became public, and she disappeared from public view, deleting accounts and declining interview requests. Internal Affairs opened an investigation and placed Brandt on paid administrative leave, fueling further outrage. Community groups rallied, and civil rights organizations demanded termination and prosecution. Judge Hartwell, understanding the system intimately, recused herself from anything connected to the case and connected her son with civil rights attorney Diane Achebe, 51, a nationally respected litigator in police misconduct cases involving minors. After reviewing the evidence, Achebe described the case as one of the clearest she had seen and filed a federal civil rights lawsuit seeking $8.4 million in damages against Brandt, Solano for failure to intervene, the police department for systemic failures, and the city for institutional negligence. The complaint alleged unlawful detention of minors without probable cause, excessive force, racial profiling, and significant emotional harm, including the impact of Isaiah's head striking the wall. The children were evaluated by board-certified child psychologists, and the findings were consistent. Elijah became withdrawn and refused public places without an adult. Naomi developed anxiety around authority figures and struggled with sleep. Isaiah developed a strong fear of uniformed officers, startled at sirens, and had recurring nightmares. During discovery, Achebe's team subpoenaed 14 years of internal records, revealing what they described as a long pattern of ignored complaints. Brandt's file documented 31 formal complaints that were reviewed and dismissed. Dashcam footage from a prior stop involving a racial slur was recorded as logged, then marked corrupted and unrecovered. Officers who had raised concerns about Brandt reportedly faced retaliation, including undesirable transfers and sudden negative evaluations. Solano's own record showed she had previously filed a written report flagging racially motivated behavior by Brandt months before the McDonald's incident, acknowledged by a supervisor but followed by no action. An independent audit of internal affairs found an overwhelming majority of racial profiling complaints dismissed without discipline, with the highest dismissal rates in complaints by black civilians against white officers. Expert testimony addressed the psychological impact of aggressive law enforcement encounters on black children, describing long-term effects such as anxiety, withdrawal from public spaces, and distrust of authority, symptoms the Hartwell children displayed. Ultimately, Brandt was terminated and his law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. A federal grand jury indicted him on charges, including assault on a minor unlawful detention, and deprivation of rights under color of law. He pleaded not guilty, with his defense arguing he responded to a 911 call and followed procedure. The trial lasted 9 days. Jurors reviewed security footage from multiple angles, phone videos, the original 911 call, and Brandt's own Bodycam audio. The jury convicted him on all counts, and he received a 4-year federal prison sentence. Solano was fired for failure to intervene. Supervisors who dismissed prior complaints were demoted, and the police chief resigned after records showed he had personally approved dismissals of numerous complaints, including those connected to missing footage. The city of Richmond settled the civil lawsuit for full $8.4 million, with no reduction, and the Hartwell family used part of the settlement to create the Hartwell Children's Justice Initiative, a nonprofit providing free legal representation and trauma counseling to children affected by police misconduct. In the months that followed, the initiative took on dozens of cases across Virginia involving minors stopped, searched, or detained without cause. Elijah continued therapy and slowly began reclaiming routines, eventually telling his grandmother he wanted to become a lawyer. Isaiah's fear responses improved more slowly, with therapists explaining that startle reactions could take time. Naomi wrote a letter for school about what happened that Saturday afternoon. With her teacher's help, it was revised and later published in the local paper, her words clearer than many official statements released by institutions. The McDonald's on Broad Street installed a small plaque near the corner booth reading, "Every child deserves to feel safe." The Richmond Metro Police Department entered a federal consent decree requiring independent civilian oversight, regular bias audits, mandatory de-escalation training, and stricter standards for incidents involving minors, including closer body camera compliance review and automatic suspensions for violations. Brandt walked into a McDonald's and saw 3 black children with iPads. He didn't see kids. He saw suspects. A federal judge saw her grandchildren crying, and a jury ultimately saw the truth.